For 3.5 years, we heard from the establishment media how terrible of a vice president Kamala Harris was. And on that day that Joe Biden decided he was not going to run and then a couple hours later endorsed her, the machine turned on and they all fell in line like they always do.
There's a woman in Philadelphia. She was part of a focus group about inflation, as a matter of fact. And while she didn't blame Kamala Harris, she did blame government. And she said something really extraordinary.
A working class mom who works as a paralegal cannot buy a $2 bell pepper because it's now $5. Imagine a mother living on food stamps. Imagine a mother who's making minimum wage trying to feed children. They're killing us without killing us.
All right, guys, we're on a glide path to the weekend. I can almost smell it. I'm so excited. I'm not sure if I want the weekend or I just want more politics. This is the time of season it is. I never know. Well, an interview happened last night, and I'm going to leave it up to the panel to decide whether it was effective or not. Kamala Harris sat down with MSNBC's Stephanie Ruhle. Now, the New York Times even panned this thing, which I got to be honest, I was shocked about that. I want to get the panel's take. We're going to show you some clips, break it down to see whether or not it was a check the box exercise or if it moved any of these persuadable voters. I actually think, well, I'll save some of this because I think it created more questions than answers, which was probably the initial intent. Next week, by the way, Robert Cahaley from Trafalgar Group, they are an amazing pollster. You've seen him before. He'll be here on Monday. Tim Murtaugh, the senior advisor of the Trump campaign, on Tuesday to preview that big debate. Tuesday is debate night. We'll be going live. A new episode of the 270, the Road to 270 is tomorrow, and then we'll be starting Wednesday of next week and going every Wednesday. So hit that notification button now because we are going to bring it to you like no one else does, state by state, go through the whole country, that Road to 270. I'm about to bring in the panel. Before I do, I want to tell you, I've been saying before, this time of the year, I get really amped up at the end of the day because I got so many ideas, issues, thoughts, questions. I'll stay up and watch these interviews. So sometimes it's hard to go to bed. Well, last night, one of the things that I always do, I take my Beam Dream powder. Now look this one is crushed. It's done because it's the cinnamon flavor. I love this stuff. I've already crushed one bag. And I'm on to the second. I moved on to the chocolate or the brownie flavor. Oh, I would drink this stuff all day long, but it's got all of those major ingredients that are natural. I've taken melatonin and magnesium in the past. This thing has everything. Reishi, theanine, apigenin, all of that stuff in one delicious powder. It's taken by athletes and professionals because it works. I'm telling you, one scoop in the microwave for 30 seconds, 30 minutes later, your head hits that pillow and you are out all night. If you go to shopbeam.com/Spicer, you can get up to 40% off your first order. I'm telling you, if you have trouble going to sleep or staying asleep, this stuff is amazing and you wake up ready to go. And maybe that's just the election season, but I'm telling you, it works. I love this stuff. Shopbeam.com/Spicer for up to 40% off your first order. All right, let's bring in the panel. Ashley Hayek, the executive director of America First Works and the chief engagement officer at America First Policy Institute. Chris Stigall, you know him. He is in the battleground state of Pennsylvania, the host of the Chris Stigall Show. And Julian Epstein, a Democratic strategist who was the former staff director of the House Oversight Committee and chief counsel for the House Democrats on the Judiciary Committee. Folks, good to see you all. I want to break down this interview last night. I just want to frame it for people. So, and this is important. I want people to understand who Stephanie Ruhle is. And then we can jump into the conversation because a lot of people are like, who is this person if you don't watch MSNBC? This is her on Bill Maher last week. Let's take a quick look.
She's running against Trump. We have two choices. And so there are some things you might not know her answer to. And in 2024, unlike 2016 for a lot of the American people, we know exactly what Trump will do, who he is, and the kind of threat he is to democracy.
I don't know.
So it's unclear to me.
That's it. Okay, so we're clear. She is an MSNBC host. She thinks Trump is a threat to democracy, and she is obviously supporting Kamala Harris. That's who they chose to do this interview with. Julian Epstein, I want to start with you. You've been critical of the Kamala Harris campaign media strategy. Was this a good move by her to choose Stephanie Ruhle and MSNBC? Was it just, I want to check a box, it's a safe space? Or was it a good move to allow her to lay out economic issues?
Well, it was a safe move. I don't know how much she accomplished. I don't think she answered any difficult questions. I think we're all old enough to remember Tim Russert and the kind of interview you would get from a prosecutor cross-examining a witness. And it was very useful, and it would reveal a candidate not just on their policy, but their strengths and weaknesses, their ability to think on their feet, their ability to deal with unanticipated questions. That's what I would call journalism. What we saw last night was not journalism. It was activism masquerading as journalism. She did not answer. She was asked the question on Nippon Steel. She didn't answer it. She was asked the questions about how she would distinguish between the Trump and Biden tariffs and tariffs she would impose. She couldn't answer that. She was asked about price controls. No answer on that. Asked about immigration. Why couldn't she impose the kind of immigration controls that Trump had in his first term? Sort of no real answer on that. It just seemed more vaporware to me than anything else. And I found it very, very embarrassing for somebody like Stephanie Ruhle, who wants to be thought of as a serious journalist. This was not journalism. This was cheerleading last night.
Stigall, I mean, look, Pennsylvania's a battleground state. There's a lot of people there that are what the media has now called Harris curious. They are interested in her, but they want to know more about her. I watched last night, and to Julian's point, I kept going, like, I don't get this. Julian knows this. We all know. I mean, like, if you prep your candidate, you can say you're going to get asked about, these issues. These are definitely going to come up. It was an interview about economics. She had just done this speech in Pittsburgh, in your state. And I felt like, at the very least, give 5 points. I'm going to lower the corporate rate on this. I'm going to cut regulatory, whatever. Just find 5 points and get past the question at the very least. And to Julian's point, I felt like it was like, I'm going to talk, say words, but I'm not going to answer the question. Then obviously there was no follow-up by Stephanie.
Yeah, the interview was a stunner. I think that the Kamala Harris people saw her little performance on Bill Maher's show Friday and said, there's our pigeon right there. That's our out. They've been accused of not talking to the press. Okay, let's go with that lady. She literally said we shouldn't expect answers from her. Even non-answers are better than Trump.
I want to get to that. I want to get to that in a minute, because I think that's important for people to see what the reaction. Because Julian's point is, you did this on Tim Russert. He would have been like, you didn't answer the question. And he would follow up usually twice to get an answer and then say, all right, you're not going to answer the question. Let's move on. But the audience knew he tried to get an answer. Last night,
telegraphed she's not interested in that. She's telegraphed, I am not going to press her or even ask her anything. And if she can't answer, I'm moving on. And she went on to explain to her colleagues in previewing this interview, hey, she wasn't clear and direct about a lot, but, whatever. She's not Trump. I mean, it's the strangest thing. It's actually worse for Stephanie Ruhle than Kamala Harris, to be honest with you.
All right, you've brought this up. So before I ask Ashley to respond, I want people to see it's, even Stephanie Ruhle said it was okay. Let me play for the audience what you're talking about, because after the interview, she goes on her own network and says, look, I'm going to address her not answering the questions. Take a look.
And one could watch that and say, well, she didn't give a clear, direct answer. That's okay, because we are not talking about clear or direct issues.
All right. So, Ashley, you just saw that. She's explaining to her colleagues, she doesn't have to answer the questions.
For 3.5 years, we heard from the establishment media how terrible of a vice president Kamala Harris was. We heard they made fun of her. They made fun of her laugh. They were complicit in exposing really how terrible she is. And on that day that Joe Biden decided he was not going to run, and then a couple hours later endorsed her, the machine turned on and they all fell in line like they always do. It reminds me, there was an interview of a girl in DC, and she was asking people, are you supporting Harris or Trump? And the people who said Harris regurgitated the media's talking points of threat to democracy. But the people who said Donald Trump said our economy, our border, my life was better 4 years ago. And I think that just goes to show you just how different our country is right now between people who are truly affected by the policies and then the elites and the establishment who, it doesn't matter if a bunch of people are flown into Springfield, Ohio. It doesn't matter if, you pass the IRS 87,000 agents who are going to audit the lower and middle class. It doesn't matter if you pass massive government spending that's going to drive spending up, because it doesn't affect me. And that's why I think you see so many people leaning into the America First policies, and again, exposes the corruption of our establishment media.
Julian mentioned price gouging. I want to play that clip for people because she was asked about it. She's made price gouging an issue as president. So this is how the exchange with her and Stephanie Ruhle. Let me play it for everybody.
Prices are still high.
Yeah, I agree with you.
You said you want to take this on by going after those who engage in price gouging.
Yeah.
But as somebody who supports free markets, who's a capitalist, how do you go after price gouging without implementing price controls? Because once we get in this zone, people start to get worried and they say, I don't know what she stands for.
So just to be very frank, I am never going to apologize for going after companies and corporations that take advantage of the desperation of the American people. And as Attorney General, I saw this happen. In the midst of an emergency, whether it be an extreme weather event or even the pandemic, we saw it, where those few companies, not the majority, not most, but those few companies that would take advantage of the desperation of people and jack up prices. Yeah, I'm going to go after them. Yes, I'm going to go after them. And that is part of a much more comprehensive plan on what we can do to bring down the cost of living, including housing, including the everyday needs of the American people.
Julian, let me just ask you this. You're a message guy. You get this, right? Just on its face, yes or no, is this an issue? Like, is price gouging a smart issue for her to be focused on?
No, because I don't think there's any evidence of price gouging.
Right. Okay.
I mean, if you look at, and I think it's sort of a road to nowhere, and I think it reveals a vaporware in her campaign platform. I mean, profits in the grocery industry are about 1.5%, and you notice she didn't answer the question about whether there should be price controls to go after what she sees as inflation. I mean, the major issue that we have with, perpetual inflation or chronic inflation as a problem we have to manage is we're looking at a $2 trillion built-in deficits every single year. The public debt is growing by at least $2 trillion a year right now. That eventually is going to create inflationary pressures. Any economist will tell you that.
Right. No, everything you're saying, I agree.
But it's a bad place for her to go because it's the wrong answer to real problem, and it's an answer that I think is going to wind her up in a lot of bad areas. I mean, look at just what happened in Argentina. I mean, they had rent control that had been going on for over a decade. The new president has just abolished rent control in Argentina, and prices for housing are coming down. Rapidly. I mean, if there's any modern day evidence as to why price controls are a disaster, just look at what's happening in Argentina right now. So it's a bad place for the Democrats to go.
She's using this issue, though. I mean, look, I'm not trying to. I don't speak for Kamala Harris. My thought has always been that she's using this issue of going after price gouging to sort of escape the issue of inflation and say, it's not inflation that's causing all of your costs to go up. It's price gouging, and I'm going to tackle it. Even at that, I don't think that most people buy it. That's the problem.
I don't think so either. And you can sort of deflect as much as you want to with smoke and mirrors over the inflation problem, which was a problem that was created by the supply chain and then greatly exacerbated. When Trump left the White House, the economy was going at 4.1%. The notion that we would dump $1.9 trillion into the economy was a disaster at that point. And it goosed what was already a structural problem, the supply chain. The problem with her using that as a tactic, which is I think your question, is that dog don't hunt. I mean, I think most economists think it's lame-brained, and I think it sort of just doesn't resonate with voters. Right. I think she would be far better off saying, look, we made a mistake. We dumped way too much money into the economy when we didn't need to. And what we've got to start doing right now is figuring out ways of trimming the sails on federal spending.
Yeah, Chris, the thing that's interesting is you go back to the last thing that we talked about. She brings up an issue that she wants to make paramount in her campaign. I'm going to be, and then when asked about it, right, again, you should be able to on any issue that you're supporting, have like 3 points to buttress it. You know, in order to do that, like when Donald Trump gets asked about inflation, he goes, well, first thing we're going to do is we're going to drill. Then I'm going to do this. Then I'm going to do this. Boom, boom, boom. You may disagree with him, but he can articulate how he's going to achieve the goal. And again, whether or not it's effective or not is a separate issue. She gets asked this, and I'm thinking to myself, you brought it up. You said that you're a price control, that you want to go after price gouging. And then your answer is, I'll never give up on that. I'll never apologize. It's like, no. Just tell me what the plan is. It's like, you know, hey, I want to go to lunch today. What's our plan? And going, I'll never apologize for wanting to eat.
You're right. Like, and there's a woman in Philadelphia that I have been playing a clip of for weeks now. She talked to a pollster. She was part of a focus group about inflation, as a matter of fact. She's a black woman from the Center City urban core area of Philadelphia. And while she didn't blame Kamala Harris, she did blame government. And she said something really extraordinary. She nearly brought to tears talking about the cost of a bell pepper. She very specifically said bell pepper. She said, they're killing us without killing us. And she said it's the government that's doing it. Now, I don't know if she connects that to the current occupant of the White House and his vice president. But to your point, I don't think people buy it. They do believe it's the government causing it. They understand that. And I got to go back to Stephanie Ruhle one more time, because while explaining this interview to her colleagues, she said, well, yes, she's going to exacerbate inflation. She intends to spend more, but she blamed the American voter, Stephanie did. And she said the American people, it's like they've forgotten or no longer think debt and deficits matter. So again, give Kamala Harris a pass on her plans to inflate the economy worse, because the American voter apparently doesn't care. Stephanie Ruhle had a disaster of a day yesterday, and I know she's not on the ballot, but it was an abysmal performance by a journalist who should have held Kamala Harris to an account.
Why are we using that word? She is not. I mean, if you go on a show and endorse another candidate,
yeah.
And again, she has every right. She has, I have a show. She has a show. You have a show. Like this is America. You want to go express your point of view. I have no problem with that. That's what makes us America. I'm glad to do this. But we give her a pass then and go, okay, NBC still lists her as senior economic, whatever. It's like, that's not, you can still be you can be a pundit. God, I am. You are. Right. I don't ever proclaim to be a journalist. I'm not. Nope. My goal is not to be even. I have a side. I want people to know it. I believe my side is better, right? Julian believes his side is better. That's great. That's what makes America so awesome. But the bottom line is she's not a journalist, and we give her a pass because she's got a little tag that says NBC News on it. You know, Ashley, I feel like I was surprised this morning when I woke up to scan the stuff. Like I'm looking through Politico and a couple of, like her economic speech in this interview were buried. It was like, it was like she got to do it, check a box, and then no accountability.
There's never going to be accountability for her. That's just how it's always been with the radical left and Kamala Harris. One of the things she talked about also was the American dream. And she admitted that the American dream is gone. And she's right. But the truth is she killed the American dream. It's because of her watch. It's because the runaway inflation, the crime, the border chaos. She started in California. She's carried it across our country. She was the border czar. She's being held accountable for none of this. The only people who can hold her accountable at this point are the American people. And they've got to do it by November 5th by voting early. That's it.
All right. So she got asked about taxes on corporations, why companies don't leave the U.S. or why they wouldn't leave the U.S. if she raised taxes. This is how she answered that question.
Expanding that child tax credit, or you mentioned housing before, giving that extra money for a first home. If you can't raise corporate taxes, or if GOP takes control of the Senate, where do you get the money to do that? Do you still go forward with those plans and borrow?
Well, but we're going to have to raise corporate taxes, and we're going to have to make sure that the biggest corporations and billionaires pay their fair share. That's just it. It's about paying their fair share. I am not mad at anyone for achieving success, but everyone should pay their fair share. And it is not right that the teachers and the firefighters that I meet every day across our country are paying a higher tax than the richest people in our country.
Bill Gates just said it this week. If he was in charge of taxes, he would have paid more. But how do you find that line to make sure corporations are paying their fair share
but they're not leaving our country.
Well, listen, I work with a lot of CEOs. I have spent a lot of time with CEOs, and I'm going to tell you that the business leaders who are actually part of the engine of America's economy agree that people should pay their fair share. They also agree that when we look at a plan such as mine that is about investing in the middle class, investing in new industries, investing in bringing down costs, invest in entrepreneurs like small businesses, that the overall economy is stronger and everyone benefits.
All right. So, Julian, I want to ask you this question because here's the thing that I thought was fascinating about that answer. One, it was a little sleight of handish, meaning she starts talking about individual tax rates versus the question being what keeps a corporation from moving? Because we all know the bottom line is important to a corporation. If they get taxed more, they'll reincorporate somewhere else because they're not going to pay a higher rate. So I want you to answer kind of both questions if I can. Bill Gates, Stephanie Ruhle noted, was commenting the other day that he should have been paying a higher rate. I don't recall Bill Gates ever paying that high rate. Nothing stops him from writing a little extra check to the federal government if he wants. No rich person will pay that unless they're forced to. So it's funny how she talks to all these people who want to pay more money, but no one does. And secondly, she evaded the question about corporations and that they have to pay their fair share. If they do, they will move. There's no question in my mind. A company's not just going to sit around and pay more. So what was the takeaway from that?
Well, she didn't answer the question, first of all. Again, I think the lack of a follow-up was an embarrassment. The argument that the Democrats are sort of split into two camps on this. There's a redistributionist wing, which is most of the Democratic Party, and there's a pro-growth wing. I'm in the pro-growth wing of the Democratic Party. The redistributionist wing continues to argue that rich people and rich corporations are not paying their fair share. That has actually been debunked. You can go down the statistics and look at the percentage of income that corporations and wealthy individuals, the top 1%, the top 5%, the top 10%, and the notion that they're not paying fair share is just sort of been debunked. But it's a mantra that the Democrats like to use, at least the redistributionist Democrats like to use, because it sounds good on the campaign trail. When the Trump corporate tax bill went through in 2017, there were about $5.4 trillion. You know what federal receipts are now today, 7 years after the corporate tax was changed? They're about 7.9 trillion. They went up from 5.4 trillion to 7.9 trillion.
That.
I mean, it's actually a remarkable record. So I think the Democrats can beat this horse to death, but there isn't, at least for pro-growth Democrats like myself, I'm a very centrist Democrat. It's sort of pandering to people who don't understand the issues, don't understand the data. And it feels very shop-worn at this point. I think Democrats would be, same point about manufacturing jobs. Democrats talk about how they've returned manufacturing jobs. You know what the number of manufacturing jobs were in 2019 pre-COVID? It was about 12.8 million manufacturing jobs. You know what the number is today? It's about 12.9, almost identical to what they were in 2019 pre-COVID. So I think Democrats are using talking points that they've been using for the last 10 years. And I think it's time to sort of update them and update the policy and update the thinking and sort of move to the political center. Because, if you look at, Gallup just came out with a poll on, where Americans are on the policy issues. And they found that Republicans are favored by voters on 9 out of 10 policy issues. So I just think sort of Democrats are sort of locked in ossified thinking, and it's just not resonating. And this is an example. And her inability to sort of even explain the basics of what she thought the corporate tax rate should be and why was disturbing.
So, Ashley, before we get into that, I want to segue into that policy, that poll that Julian just answered, because that's really gets into kind of a lot of what you guys do. You mentioned the IRS agents. I want to just comment on that for a second that got hired. You guys know this. There are now thousands and thousands of more IRS agents. They are sending out these things called pay up notices all across the country, telling people that they owe money. It could be business. It could be personal. It could be $5,000, $5 million. It doesn't matter. They've got the full weight of the federal government behind them, trying to get you to pay what you owe. And trust me, when they come a knocking, it's not going to be a pleasant experience. They will go through your life, go through every document, go through every transaction, figure out if they can squeeze some money from you to bring in. That's what they are now hired to do. But there is a solution. They've got the full weight of the federal government behind them. I recommend that you get professional help if you have that. I think the best in the business are the folks at Tax Network. If you go to tnusa.com/Sean Spicer, you got to use the full name. I mean, this is no joke, right? tnusa.com. Sean Spicer, you can have a conversation with the folks that I think are the best in the business. These guys have saved their clients over $1 billion. Trust me when I say you do not want to go up against the IRS alone. They'll crush you. They just will. I'm sorry to tell you. It doesn't matter whether or not you think you're right or not. You need professional help. The folks at Tax Network know exactly what they're doing. They've got the expertise, the history, the professionalism to take on the IRS on your behalf. Go to tnusa.com/Sean Spicer to do that. Ashley, Julian's point, we're favored on the Republican side in all of these issues. It really is issue versus personality, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, one of the things she also talked about when she was mentioning the fair share, I thought that was interesting, referring to firefighters, that they shouldn't have to pay. Well, the firefighters and the blue collar workers have to pay for that student loan debt she's going to wipe away. So, she does it in other places. And as also mentioned, when corporations face higher taxes, if they don't leave, they pass the cost on to us through higher prices on goods or layoffs. And if you remember when the tax cuts passed, I remember in Southern California, Disney gave a bonus check to all of their workers because they were saving so much money. So her solutions don't work. They're trying to go off, as we know, vibes and joy. But the truth is, like I said before, she's killed everything. And at the end of the day, her good vibes aren't going to put gas in my tank to get my kids to soccer practice. So we're done here. We're done. It's over. And I think that the American people are speaking loud and clear, and we're seeing it in the returns in states like Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and I will say, to Ashley's point, people aren't buying this because we're not, as Stephanie Ruhle and others may think, that we're just not that smart or sophisticated about nomenclature economically. We're not so dumb that we don't understand the woman occupies the office now. She's there now. And if she has the power and the prescriptions to fix things, and she says on day one she'll do them, it doesn't equate. People understand she's in office now. How do you run against yourself? She's actually trying to convince voters she's not occupying the seat now.
But isn't it working? Look, why?
I don't think so.
Okay, but to Julian's point, Chris, we're winning on all these issues, right? She's in the office. People aren't happy with it. Why? We should be up 5-6 points.
Well, it's Trump, though.
But
that's, people. Yeah. There's just a natural Trump hatred. That whole Bill Maher panel said it Friday. Oh, yeah, Trump's an awful, awful guy. There's one New York Times guy that was willing to say, well, I'm not going to vote for Trump, but shouldn't we expect better from Kamala Harris? And they dogpiled on him and said, no, Trump's a monster. Just vote for her and leave her alone.
Trump is a gay.
So
well, look, I sort of agree with that. But look, I think if this is a race about temperament, the Democrats are going to win. If this is a race about policy, Republicans are going to win. Look at the first debate. I think that first debate was very unfair. And I think David Muir was atrocious on the fact checks. But, Trump could have fact checked on crime. He could have said the crime rate in urban areas has gone up. Property crime has gone up 25%. Violent crime has gone up 57%. According to the data that the Justice Department released last week. He didn't. Trump could have said, hey, this ruse, this smear on Charlottesville was wrong. I condemned the white nationalists, and he didn't. He could have said, when Kamala Harris said that unemployment was the worst since the Great Depression, he could have corrected that. And he could have said the pre-COVID unemployment rate was 3.4% as compared to Biden's 4.2%. And the unemployment that we had during COVID to less than 6% when Trump left office. He didn't. He could have said that there were troops in the war zone when Kamala Harris said there weren't. He could have gone after Afghanistan. I think there is, if you look at every issue, the Democrats are behind on economic issues, on energy, on the cultural issues, on gender, on foreign affairs. But you don't hear these being prosecuted very effectively by the Trump campaign. And that's why I think we're in a tie we're in a tie nationally. I mean, I think the Democrats have been vaporware. It's all been about this sort of campaign on joy, which I have criticized and I have said is empty, should be embarrassing to the party. But at the same time, this is a race that the Republicans should be, given how unpopular the current administration is. This is a race that Republicans should be up by 5, 6. And the fact that they're not is not just because I think the media has been unfair. It has been unfair. Also because the Republicans have not prosecuted a very effective campaign.
I got to jump in. I'm sorry. A couple things. Number one, when you look at California and New York, they're going to weigh heavy in the national polls. President Trump is the game day player. I don't trust the polls. I just think they're not right. But given that, if you look at where Kamala Harris is today compared to Joe Biden in 2020, she is extremely underwater with Hispanic voters. President Trump is tied. Part of that is because of her policies with look at Venezuela, where price controls wrecked the nation's economy, caused widespread shortages, caused skyrocketing inflation and crushing poverty. And she would have us follow down that same path. And I think that's a big reason why we're losing some of that Hispanic vote, as well as the traditional values. President Trump is also at 30% with Black men. That's double where he was in 2020. So while in these national polls, it looks a little bit closer than what we may be comfortable with. We know he's a game day player. We know she's underwater. And make no mistake, the Democrat Party is wrecked right now. You have a massive divide. The uncommitted movement, who held out 100,000 votes in the primary election, decided to not endorse Kamala Harris. That could have major ramifications in places like Michigan. She's going to have to appeal to large groups of people, especially Black Americans in Detroit and Atlanta and Philadelphia. She's struggling. You may not see it in a national poll, but the reckoning is coming so long as conservatives do what they need to do and turn out the vote.
And I would concur with Ashley.
Well, I would disagree.
Oh, sorry, Julian. I would add quickly that I believe that there are people who will not tell a pollster they intend to vote for Trump, call them shy Trump voter or what have you, but they ultimately end up casting that vote. I've seen multiple stories of even Democrat pollsters who say, careful, I think we're undercounting what's going on here with Trump. Every time, the margins have always shown that the Democrats playing better than they actually finish against Trump. And I think there's an element of that.
There's no question that there are polling errors, and the polling errors favor Democrats. There's just no question about it. We saw it in 2006, 2016, we saw it in 2020. There is no question that Harris is behind both the Clinton and the Biden benchmarks in the battleground states. She's not underwater with Hispanic voters, but she is losing voters relative to where Trump was. To where Biden was in 2020. She is losing voters significantly in the African-American community and most other demographics. She is gaining voters with college-educated elites. She's gaining voters on the gender gap with women, at least according to the polling. That said, I still think if you look at my point before was not about the polling error, which there is some. I still think we're at about a tie race right now. I would give maybe Trump the very slight advantage. My point is that the Republicans, given where the public is on almost every issue other than abortion, you can look at the economy, you can look at energy, you can look at immigration, you can look at crime, you can look at handling of foreign affairs. Democrats are behind, in most cases, double digits. And that is not reflected in the polling in terms of where the candidates are. And that is because I think Trump is prosecuting an ineffective campaign. And that is most evident in the debate where he sort of missed the opportunity to recount for the 70 million people that were watching it the record that most people think has been a bad one under the Biden administration. And instead, sort of really got ruffled and trolled by her dressing down of him and her scolding of him. And that's the mistake. I mean, his speech was better yesterday for sure, but he could really be throwing this away.
Yeah. Yesterday was the economy. Tomorrow, she's headed to Arizona, Cochise County. This, from what I talked to some folks in Arizona last night, and I said, okay, is this a legitimate border visit, right? Or is this a check the box? And everybody says it's legit, based on where she's going. Now, what she does, who knows? But I'm just saying, she seems to be trying to tackle the economy and the border head on, Chris. Like this
yeah.
border visit, I get it. It's like she knows. I mean, she's doing the opposite, frankly, of what Julian's doing to some extent, right? Julian's saying, hey, Trump campaign, you're winning on the issues. Just focus on this. She at least, I get it, word salad-esque, but she's at least saying, I'm going to talk about the economy, or I'll create the impression I am, and then I'll go look at the border.
She took a few days off, mind you. I think Trump has had a really stellar few days while she went missing. And until yesterday, she had been virtually vanished from the campaign trail. Then she surfaces, and yeah, I'm going to talk about the economy today. I'm going to go to the border tomorrow. I'm going to try to convince people I wasn't running the border, and I'm not in charge of the border and the economy now. Again, if this would be the greatest Houdini act in political history, if she can convince enough people that she is not tied to and responsible for what we're living right now, hats off to her. And boy, what a sorry state of affairs the country's in. If we as a voting bloc can't get our minds wrapped around the idea that she's responsible for what we're living today. But I would also say, while I concur that Trump has not always been great at prosecuting, he's been prosecuted for 7 years as Hitlerian and an affront to democracy. He's a unique character in that we have had a steady diet for 7 years of he's the end of the world if he wins. I don't know how one woos voters over to your side when you've had so many millions convinced that it's the end of the world if he wins, So these are really unique candidates, both of them.
I think a lot of that has been crying wolf, and I have been very critical of the Democrats' use of lawfare. I think the cases in New York, for example, the Letitia James on the civil case on the fraud, and I think the Alvin Bragg cases were travesties. And I think they would have cases that would have never been brought if the last name was something other than Trump. So I agree with that point. But let me just make my point again on the immigration issue. So she's going to go to the border and she's going to say, I'm for secure borders, and look at the Langford bill that I supported that Trump tried to undermine. It was a bipartisan bill. And I mean, if I'm Donald Trump or if I'm the Republicans, I say about the Langford bill, first of all, it was not bipartisan. It was one member of the Senate. Secondly, the Langford bill would allow 2 million migrants a year into the U.S., which was about the amount of migrants that were coming in under the Biden 4 years. And so if the public rejected that by 70, 80%, then why are we going to continue with a policy that, a bill, the Langford bill, which does a couple of good things with increasing border enforcement and resources, but allows for 5 million migrants a day, which is the equivalent of about 2 million a year, which is something that's very unpopular with the American people. I'm a Democrat. I'm pro-legal immigration. I'm anti-illegal immigration. If I were a member of Congress, I would have voted against the Langford bill because it was that permissive. But Republicans have not made that argument.
I agree.
I have heard Trump say, you don't need a bill. You're the president. Do it now. You can do it by executive fiat.
You don't need a bill. I've said that. You don't need a bill. The Supreme Court said that. I wrote a piece on this in the New York Post for a couple months ago. In 2018, the Supreme Court said the president's authority to close the border is plenary, and it's essentially unquestioned. You don't need legislation. Biden could do that tomorrow. But when people say, hey, there's a bipartisan legislation and we not only need to close the borders, we need more resources at the border, which is true. We do need more border patrol agents. We need more judges. We need more. All of that is true. All of the funding in the Langford bill has merit. But when that's the Democratic answer to the problem, it's very persuasive to a lot of people. And the Republicans have let that go instead of saying, hey, look, you're going to allow under this bill, you're going to allow 10 million under the next administration the way we got 10 million under this administration.
See, by the way,
not made that case
just
effective.
So we're clear, because I want to move on, but I think what she does is she gets us to have these conversations. The bottom line is she didn't do anything for 3.5 years. She didn't support anything. The Langford bill, I agree with you, Julian. I can't believe how many times I'm agreeing with the Democrat this show, but you're either I'm going soft or I don't know what the heck's going on. But the bottom line is she gets to say, this is her talking point. I would have supported the Langford bill. Okay, well, yeah, there's a million problems with that. And that just buys enough time to get around the question, why didn't you do anything? Ashley, I want to start with you, get you in. obviously love to end Thursdays by going through winners and losers. Who do you have as a winner this week?
As a winner this week, Mrs. Trump in her interview on Fox and Friends. Beautiful interview.
Why?
Great questions. She's such a classy lady. We would be so honored to have her again as our first lady once again. She's amazing. I'm really impressed, and I love having her back out in the communities.
Okay. Real quick, I want to ask you this. I brought this up with Mark Halperin in the morning meeting that we do. Do you think she does more interviews, or was it Fox and done?
I think she'll do some select interviews. I really do.
Okay. Yeah, that's what Halperin said. I don't think so. I think this is it. Chris Stigall, who do you think won the week?
New Yorkers. For whatever reason, all of the sudden, everybody from Eric Adams to their police commissioner to Kathy Hochul to former Governor Cuomo, they're just being exposed one after another. New York, and Trump's been campaigning there. I don't know. I feel something kind of funny about New York, and maybe there's help on the way to Gotham. Right. Who knows for sure?
Julian, who had a good week in your mind?
Well, I think Harris did, but not because she deserved it, because she got a pass from the news media. I think the people who had a bad week were New Yorkers, because they found out, to Chris's point, I take a contrary view, they found out some unpleasant things about their mayor, and certainly Adams would be in the loser category for this week.
Okay, so let me just ask you this. As the lawyer of the panel, and I don't think, I know I'm not, Julian, would you suggest, or do you believe that Mayor Adams will resign? I am in the camp, and again, I'm a non-lawyer, but I always think that staying in office is your greatest negotiating tool, right? Maybe with the feds, to say, I'll resign if you do this. Is it smart for him to resign, and do you think he'll resign?
My guess is he won't resign, and I always like to have an answer when I'm on a podcast. I don't have an answer on this because I haven't read the indictment. I don't know how strong the indictment is. The indictment was unsealed while we were doing this taping. So I haven't read it yet. So I don't know.
Fair, good.
And here's the quote. The quote is, "I will continue to do the job." He has gone on record now to say he will, in fact, stay in the post.
But what he says now and what he says after he confabs with the lawyers in a couple hours, who knows? Yeah. Ashley, who was your loser of the week?
Well, Eric Adams, and to that point, it doesn't matter what the indictment is in New York, because if they have one, they'll just use whatever, evidently.
Chris Stigall, do you have a loser of the week?
Oh, a loser? It's a tie between Vladimir Zelensky and Stephanie Ruhle. Stephanie, for all the reasons we've already said. Vladimir Zelensky for politicizing, jumping into American political politics, trashing J.D. Vance, and touring an ammo plant in Pennsylvania, making this war in Ukraine and Russia a purely political partisan event.
Glad you brought that up. I will tell you this. No matter where you come down on funding Ukraine or whatever, I will tell you what Zelensky did, trashing J.D. Vance, was stupid. It was a really dumb move, because if he ends up having to deal with him and Trump, the relationship has now soured. This was not smart from a guy who is going around hat in hand asking people for money. Dumb move. Speaker Johnson obviously asking the Ukrainian ambassador to resign, whatever. But I mean, it was a political move going to New Hampshire. Real quick, lastly, just yes or no. Are you guys watching the VP debate with big interest? Ashley, yes or no?
Yes.
Julian?
Yes, big time.
And then Chris?
Enthusiastically, yes.
Well, we're going live after it. I'm excited. I actually think this could be a really big one. I know everyone says they're not consequential. I think the nature of this cycle is so historic that we will see one. All right, guys, thanks for being here. Remember, tomorrow, an update on the road to 270. We'll start that Wednesday of next week, every week going forward. Plus, Robert Cahaley from the Trafalgar Group is here on Monday. Tim Murtaugh, senior advisor of the Trump campaign, on Tuesday. We've got a lot happening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Road to 270 update. Continue to hit that notification button and subscribe. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.